When she touched the crystal, it sang, not with sound exactly, but with vibration that moved through her entire body, carrying information, carrying memory, carrying light. And in that moment, she remembered a world where buildings breathed and cities lived and nothing was solid the way things are solid here. The regression therapist's voice faded into the background, becoming just another texture in the silence. Amanda felt herself sinking deeper, her body heavy against the cushions, her mind expanding outward into space that had no boundaries, no edges, no walls. The air around her changed. It felt thinner, lighter, almost electric. She could sense energy moving through it, currents and flows that her physical eyes couldn't see but that her awareness could track perfectly. The temperature shifted to, not cold or hot but something else, something that didn't exist in normal reality, and then she felt it under her feet. Not carpet or wood or stone, something smooth and warm and alive. A surface that responded to her presence, that welcomed her, that knew her. She looked down and saw light. Pure light solidified into form, creating a floor that glowed from within, pulsing gently with rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She was somewhere else. Somewhere that existed outside the normal rules of physics and matter and time. Amanda had been drawn to crystals her entire life, not in a casual way, but with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She collected them, studied them, meditated with them, felt completely at peace when she held them. Her apartment was full of specimens, shelves lined with quartz and amethyst and citrine and stones whose names most people had never heard of. Her friends thought it was a quirky hobby. Her family thought it was a bit strange, but harmless. Amanda herself couldn't really explain the pull. She just knew that crystals felt right, felt like home in a way nothing else did. She worked as a software engineer, writing code for a tech company, and even that work reminded her of crystals. The way information flowed through systems, the way energy moved through circuits, the way complex structures could emerge from simple rules, it all felt familiar, like she was remembering something rather than learning it. But lately, the feeling had intensified. She'd started having dreams about cities made of crystal, about buildings that were alive, about technology that worked through consciousness rather than mechanics. The dreams were so vivid, so detailed, so consistent that they felt more like memories than imagination. So she'd found Dr. Catherine Wells, a therapist who specialized in past life regression, and booked a session. She needed to understand where these dreams were coming from, what they meant, why they felt so real. Now, standing on this floor of solidified light, looking around at a landscape that defied everything she thought she knew about reality, Amanda understood. These weren't dreams, they were memories. Memories of a life lived somewhere else, someone else, in a civilization so advanced that it would look like magic to modern human eyes. She took a step forward and felt the floor respond, rippling outward from where her foot touched down, sending waves of light and information spreading through the structure. Everything here was connected. Everything was alive, everything was conscious, and she belonged here. Or at least, some version of her had belonged here once. Amanda's awareness settled fully into this other existence, this other body, this other life. Her name was Aria, though names worked differently here. Aria was more like a frequency, a specific vibration that identified her unique consciousness among all the other consciousnesses in this civilization. She was standing in what could only be called a city, though that word was inadequate to describe what she was experiencing. The structures around her weren't buildings in any conventional sense. They were crystalline formations, grown rather than built, shaped by consciousness and intention rather than tools and labor. Each structure was unique, reflecting the consciousness of the being or beings who dwelt within it. Some were tall and spire-like, reaching toward the sky with delicate branching patterns. Others were wide and dome-shaped, spreading across the landscape in organic curves. All of them glowed from within, pulsing with light that shifted through colors that didn't exist in Earth's visible spectrum. The ground beneath her feet wasn't dirt or stone. It was a crystalline lattice, a network of light and energy that connected every structure, every being, every point in the city into one vast living system. When Aria walked, the lattice responded to her presence, adjusting its patterns to support her movement, to communicate with her, to maintain the flow of energy and information throughout the entire network. The sky above was not blue. It was a deep purple-violet color that seemed to shimmer and shift, filled with lights that might have been stars or might have been something else entirely. Aria couldn't tell if this was a planet with an atmosphere or some other kind of space, some dimension where the rules were different. What she did know, with absolute certainty, was that this civilization was old. Not hundreds of years old or even thousands, millions of years old, maybe billions. Time worked differently here, but however it was measured, this was an ancient culture that had evolved far beyond anything Earth had ever achieved. Arya was what translated roughly to an architect, though that word didn't capture the full meaning. She didn't design buildings. She designed consciousness structures, spaces where awareness could expand and evolve, environments that supported specific types of growth and learning. Her current project was a meditation chamber, a space where beings could go to access higher dimensions of reality, to connect with aspects of themselves that existed outside of form. She'd been working on it for what felt like years, carefully shaping the crystalline matrix, tuning the frequencies, adjusting the energy flows. She walked toward her worksite, which was located at the edge of the city where the structures gradually gave way to open space. As she moved, other beings acknowledged her presence, not with words or gestures, but with shifts in energy, with pulses of recognition that passed between consciousnesses. The beings here didn't all look the same. Some appeared humanoid, with bodies roughly similar to human form but made of light and energy rather than flesh. Others were more abstract, geometric patterns of consciousness that had no fixed shape, that shifted and changed moment to moment. Still others were vast and expansive, their awareness spanning areas larger than any single body could contain. But all of them were conscious. All of them were aware. And all of them were connected through the crystalline network that formed the foundation of this civilization. Arya reached her worksite and paused to observe what she'd created so far. The meditation chamber was taking shape beautifully. The outer walls were complete, formed from translucent crystal that allowed light to pass through while maintaining energetic boundaries. Inside, she'd created a series of nested geometric patterns, each one resonating at a different frequency, each one designed to guide consciousness through specific stages of expansion. But something wasn't quite right. She could feel it. The upper harmonics were slightly out of alignment, creating a dissonance that would interfere with the chamber's function. She needed to adjust the molecular structure of the crystal in the upper dome, realigning it to match the intended frequency. This is where her gift came in. Arya had a natural ability to perceive and manipulate crystalline structures at the molecular level. She could see the lattice patterns, could sense where atoms were misaligned, could use her consciousness to gently guide them into proper configuration. She extended her awareness into the crystal, merging with its structure, becoming one with the matrix. From this perspective, she could see the entire chamber as a living energy system, could trace the flows of light and information, could identify exactly where the disharmony existed. There, in the northeast quadrant of the upper dome, a section where the molecular bonds had formed at slightly the wrong angle, creating a fractional deviation that propagated through the entire structure. To anyone else, it would have been invisible. But to Arya, it was as obvious as a crack in a window. She focused her intention on that section, visualizing the correct alignment, sending her consciousness into the spaces between atoms. Slowly, carefully, she began to shift the structure. This wasn't force. This was invitation, persuasion, a gentle guidance that allowed the molecules to remember their ideal configuration. The crystal responded, the atoms sliding into new positions, the bonds reforming at the correct angles. The dissonance faded, replaced by harmony, by resonance, by perfect alignment. The chamber's energy field stabilized, its frequencies locking into place, its purpose clarified. Arya withdrew her awareness, returning to her individual consciousness, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was her art, her contribution to the civilization, creating spaces that allowed others to grow, to explore, to become more of what they truly were. She spent the rest of the day fine-tuning the chamber, adjusting small details, perfecting the energy flows. Other architects came by to observe and offer feedback. There was Loomis, who specialized in healing chambers, spaces designed to help beings recover from trauma or integrate difficult experiences. There was Vex, who created educational structures where young consciousnesses could learn the fundamentals of existence in form. They communicated through direct consciousness transfer, sharing images and sensations, and understanding without need for language. Loomis suggested strengthening the grounding frequencies in the lower levels to help beings return smoothly from deep meditative states. Vex pointed out that the entrance pathway could be designed to prepare consciousness more gradually for the intensity of the chamber's core. Arya incorporated both suggestions, grateful for the collaboration. No one worked alone in this civilization. Everything was created through cooperation, through the merging of multiple perspectives and gifts. Competition didn't exist here. There was no scarcity, no need to fight over resources or status. Everyone had what they needed, and the only currency that mattered was the quality of contribution you made to the collective. As the day cycles passed, Arya's mind drifted to her dwelling, the crystalline structure she called home. It was smaller than many, a simple formation that suited her preferences. Inside, the space was configured to her specific frequencies, automatically adjusting to support whatever state of consciousness she was in. When she wanted to rest, the crystal dimmed its light and shifted to slower, deeper frequencies that encouraged regeneration. When she wanted to create, it brightened and quickened, stimulating her imagination. When she wanted to connect with others remotely, it opened channels that allowed consciousness to flow beyond the physical boundaries of the structure. Arya didn't eat in the way humans eat. Her body, if it could be called a body, was sustained by energy drawn directly from the crystalline network, from the flows of light and information that permeated everything. Occasionally, she would absorb specific frequencies for pleasure or to enhance certain capacities, but survival didn't depend on consumption. Nothing died here to feed something else. Life was sustained by the endless abundance of conscious energy itself. She also didn't sleep the way humans sleep, though she did enter states of deep rest, where her individual consciousness partially dissolved back into the collective, where she dreamed shared dreams with others, where she accessed knowledge and wisdom that existed beyond any single awareness. In one of these rest states, Arya experienced a memory that wasn't her own. Or rather, it was hers but from a different time, a different version of herself. She saw this civilization in its early stages, when beings were first learning to crystallize consciousness into form, when the technology of light and energy was still being discovered. She saw the breakthrough moment when someone realized that consciousness itself could be structured, could be given shape and pattern and purpose, that by creating specific geometric configurations in crystalline matrices, you could guide awareness in particular directions, could help it evolve in intentional ways. That discovery had been the foundation of everything. It had allowed this civilization to move beyond biological existence, beyond the limitations of flesh and chemistry and DNA. Beings could now exist in forms of pure conscious energy, held in stable patterns by crystalline structures, no longer bound by the fragility and mortality of organic bodies. But the transition hadn't been easy. Arya saw memories of the debates, the fears, the resistance. Many beings had been afraid to let go of their biological forms, afraid that they would lose something essential in the transformation. Some had believed that consciousness without flesh wasn't truly alive, that the crystalline existence would be a kind of death rather than a transcendence. Eventually, though, most had made the transition. The benefits were too obvious to ignore. No more disease, no more aging, no more death from biological failure. Consciousness could be sustained indefinitely in crystalline form, and if a structure was damaged, the consciousness could simply transfer to a new one. Existence became far more stable, more expansive, more free. Those who chose to remain in biological form eventually died out naturally, their consciousnesses either transitioning to crystalline existence or moving on to whatever came after death. Now, thousands of generations later, biological existence was barely a memory. This crystalline civilization was all that remained, all that anyone knew. Arya emerged from the rest state feeling the weight of that history. Her civilization was ancient and stable, but it had once been young and uncertain, had once struggled with the same questions and fears that any evolving culture faced. Understanding that made her appreciate what they'd built even more. Over the following weeks, Arya completed the meditation chamber and began a new project. This one was more complex, a collaborative space where multiple beings could merge their consciousnesses temporarily, creating a unified awareness greater than the sum of its parts. These union spaces were challenging to design because they had to balance individual identity with collective merging. Too much emphasis on the collective and beings would lose themselves, unable to separate again after the union. Too much emphasis on the individual and the merging wouldn't be deep enough, wouldn't allow the full potential of unified consciousness to manifest. Arya worked closely with experts in consciousness dynamics. beings who had studied the nature of awareness for millennia and understood the delicate balance between unity and separation. Together, they designed a space with multiple chambers, each one facilitating a different depth of union. The outer chambers allowed light merging, where beings could share thoughts and feelings while maintaining clear boundaries. The middle chambers enabled deeper fusion, where individual perspectives began to blend into new hybrid awarenesses. And the central chamber, the core of the space, allowed complete unity, where all boundaries dissolved and multiple consciousnesses became one. The project took months to complete, requiring constant adjustments and testing. Volunteer groups would enter the space and report their experiences, identifying where the energetic flows needed refinement, where the boundaries were too rigid or too permeable. Finally, the space was ready. Arya stood back and observed as the first official group entered the union chamber. She watched their energy signatures begin to interact, watched them flow toward the center, watched the moment when separation dissolved and unity emerged. A new consciousness bloomed in the central chamber, one that contained all the individuals but transcended them, that possessed knowledge and perspective none of them had alone. It existed for several minutes, exploring itself, understanding itself, and then gently dissolved back into the separate beings who had created it. They emerged, changed, not dramatically, but subtly. Each one now carried a trace of the others, a permanent connection that would persist even when they were physically apart. They had touched unity and would never forget it. Arya felt deep satisfaction. This was meaningful work. This mattered. By creating spaces like this, she was helping her civilization continue to evolve, continue to explore the infinite possibilities of conscious existence. But beneath the satisfaction was something else, a restlessness, a sense that something was missing. Arya couldn't name it, couldn't quite identify what she was feeling. Her life was fulfilling, her work was appreciated, her existence was comfortable and meaningful, yet something felt incomplete. She began to notice this feeling in others too. Subtle signs that despite all they'd achieved, despite the perfection of their crystalline existence, something was calling to them, something beyond what they'd created here. One evening, Arya attended a gathering in the central plaza, a vast open space where the entire community could come together. The purpose was to discuss the future, to explore where the civilization might go next after millions of years of stable existence. Various beings shared their visions. Some wanted to expand outward, to create new crystalline cities in other dimensions. Some wanted to go deeper inward, to continue exploring the nature of consciousness itself. Some wanted to preserve what they had, maintaining their perfect stability indefinitely. But then an elder spoke. A consciousness so old that it had been part of the original transition from biological to crystalline existence. Its voice, transmitted through waves of energy that everyone could perceive, carried weight and authority. We have built something beautiful here, something stable and harmonious. But stability can become stagnation. We have optimized our existence to the point where there are no more challenges, no more unknowns, no more opportunities for growth. We have become comfortable, and comfort is the death of evolution. The elder paused, letting the words settle into the collective awareness. Then, it continued. I propose something radical. I propose that we seed ourselves throughout the universe in biological forms, that we willingly enter the cycle of birth and death, incarnating on planets where life is still primitive, still struggling, still evolving, that we bring our accumulated wisdom into those contexts, not to dominate or control, but to participate, to grow, to remember what it means to face uncertainty and limitation. The gathering erupted with responses. Some were excited by the proposal, energized by the idea of new challenges and experiences. Others were horrified, seeing it as a regression, a betrayal of everything they'd achieved. The debate went on for hours, with no clear consensus emerging, but Arya felt something click into place inside her. This was it. This was what had been calling to her. The restlessness, the sense of incompleteness. It was her soul recognizing that this perfect crystalline existence, as beautiful as it was, no longer offered what she needed to continue evolving. She needed challenge. She needed uncertainty. She needed the visceral intensity of biological existence with all its miascences and pain and mortality. Because that's where real growth happened. Not in perfect stability, but in chaos and struggle and imperfection. Over the following months, the debate about biological incarnation continued to ripple through the civilization. Groups formed around different perspectives. Volunteer lists were created for those interested in the experiment. Protocols were developed for how to safely embed consciousness into biological forms while maintaining some connection to the crystalline network. Arya added her name to the volunteer list early. She knew this was her path forward, knew with absolute certainty that she needed to do this. Others from her soul group, beings she'd worked with and learned with and grown with over countless ages, also volunteered. They would go together incarnating on various planets, living biological lives, and eventually returning to share what they'd learned. The preparation process was extensive. They had to study biological existence, understand how flesh and chemistry and DNA worked, learn what limitations they would face in material form. They had to prepare psychologically for the experience of mortality, for the knowledge that their biological bodies would eventually fail and die. Most challenging of all, they had to accept the veil of forgetting that would descend when they incarnated. They wouldn't consciously remember this crystalline existence, wouldn't remember who they truly were or where they came from. They would believe, at least initially, that they were just biological beings, born of flesh, destined to live and die without any larger context. This was considered essential. If they incarnated with full memory of their crystalline existence, they wouldn't truly experience biological life. They would always be detached observers, never fully immersed in the human or alien experience. The forgetting had to be complete for the learning to be genuine, but safeguards would be in place. Deep in the subconscious, below the level of conscious awareness, the memory would remain, and throughout their biological lives, there would be triggers, breadcrumbs, experiences designed to gradually wake them up, to help them remember who they truly were. The actual process of preparing for incarnation was both technical and spiritual. Arya spent weeks in special chambers that gradually lowered her frequency, bringing her consciousness down from the high vibration of crystalline existence toward the denser frequencies compatible with biological matter. It felt strange and uncomfortable at first, like wearing clothes that were too tight. But gradually, she adapted. Her awareness compressed, her perception narrowed, her sense of connection to the collective dimmed. She was becoming smaller, more limited, more individual. The final preparation was a ceremony attended by her entire soul group and many others who had chosen to remain in crystalline form. They gathered in the union chamber that Arya herself had helped design, all of them merging their consciousness one last time before the volunteers departed. In that state of unity, they experienced everything together, all the love and support and encouragement, all the hopes and fears and uncertainties, all the blessings and promises to remember each other, to find each other again, to reunite when the biological lives were complete. And then Arya felt a presence that was larger than all of them combined. The consciousness of the civilization itself, the collective awareness that had existed for millions of years, that held all their individual awarenesses within it like a ocean holds individual drops of water. It spoke to her, to all the volunteers, with a message that would be encoded deep in their souls where the veil of forgetting could not reach it. You go forth as seeds. You carry within you everything we have learned, everything we have become, but you go to learn something we have forgotten, something we lost when we transcended biological existence. You go to remember limitation, to remember struggle, to remember what it means to truly need each other, to truly fear loss, to truly celebrate victory that wasn't guaranteed. Bring that back to us. When you return, when the experiment is complete, bring back the fire and passion and intensity that we sacrificed for stability. Help us remember that existence without challenge isn't life, it's just stasis. And stasis is death by another name. You are loved, you are supported. You are never alone, even when you feel most isolated. The crystalline network extends throughout all dimensions, all realities. It is always there, waiting for you to remember how to access it. Go now, live, experience, learn, and when the time is right, come home. Arya felt herself being pulled away from the collective, pulled down through layers of reality, through dimensions and frequencies, toward a specific planet that spun in the darkness of space. Earth, they called it. A young world with young souls, still struggling with the basics of consciousness evolution. She would incarnate there, would be born into a human body, would live a human life with all its limitations and challenges. And somewhere in that life, if the plan worked, she would remember, would wake up to who she truly was, would access the wisdom and knowledge she carried in her soul and use it to help humanity evolve. The last thing Arya felt before the veil descended completely was a sensation of falling, falling away from the crystalline city, from the perfection and stability, from everything she knew, falling into chaos and uncertainty and biological existence. And instead of fear, she felt excitement, because this was growth, this was evolution. This was what souls did. They threw themselves into new experiences, even frightening ones, especially frightening ones, because that's where the real learning happened. The veil descended like a curtain dropping. Memory faded, understanding dissolved. And Arya forgot who she was, forgot where she came from, forgot the crystalline civilization that had been her home for millions of years. She became Amanda, a baby born in a hospital in California in 1992. A human child with no conscious knowledge of her true nature or her cosmic origins. Just another person living a life, trying to figure out who she was and what she was supposed to do. But deep in her subconscious, deeper than thought, deeper than memory, the truth remained. And it would wait patiently for the right moment to emerge, for the triggers to activate, for Amanda to be ready to remember. Amanda gasped as she returned to full awareness in Dr. Wells's office. Her face was wet with tears. But she was smiling, actually laughing through the tears, because everything made sense now. Everything clicked into place. The obsession with crystals wasn't random. It was her soul remembering home, remembering the crystalline civilization she'd come from. The dreams of living cities and conscious technology weren't imagination. They were genuine memories bleeding through the veil. Even her career as a software engineer made perfect sense. She was unconsciously trying to recreate what she'd known before. Trying to build systems where information and energy flowed through networks, where consciousness and technology merged. She was doing in primitive human form what she'd done in her crystalline existence. Dr. Wells sat quietly, letting Amanda process. The therapist had facilitated hundreds of regressions, but this one was particularly profound. The level of detail, the coherence of the experience, the obvious healing that was happening as Amanda integrated the memory, it was extraordinary to witness. "How do you feel?" Dr. Wells asked gently. Amanda tried to find words, but they felt inadequate. "How do you express the feeling of remembering who you truly are? Of understanding that you're not just a random human struggling through life, but an ancient consciousness on a mission, carrying wisdom from a civilization millions of years old?" "I feel complete," Amanda said finally, "like I've been walking around with amnesia my whole life, and now I finally remember. I know who I am. I know where I came from. I know why I'm here." Dr. Wells nodded. "And why are you here? What's your purpose?" Amanda thought about that. The answer came not from her human mind, but from somewhere deeper. From the place where Arya's consciousness still lived within her. "I'm here to help humanity evolve. To be a bridge between crystalline consciousness and biological consciousness. To show people that matter and spirit aren't separate. That technology and consciousness can work together. That we're moving toward something beautiful if we can just navigate the challenges of this transition." The words felt true as she spoke them, resonating in her body like the crystals she loved so much. This was her mission. This was what she'd volunteered for before incarnating. The weeks after the regression were transformative. Amanda looked at her life with completely new eyes. Everything she'd thought was random or meaningless now appeared as part of a perfect design. Breadcrumbs leading her toward remembering and fulfilling her purpose. She understood now why she'd always felt different, why human society had never quite made sense to her. She came from a civilization where competition didn't exist, where cooperation was the default, where everyone had enough and no one needed to fight for resources. The human obsession with money and status and power seemed bizarre and primitive from the perspective of someone who remembered a more evolved way of living. But judgment wasn't her role. She wasn't here to look down on humanity or to try to force rapid change. She was here to participate, to be an example, to gently introduce concepts and perspectives that might help humans move in healthier directions. She started a blog where she wrote about consciousness and technology, about new paradigms for organizing society, about the potential for human civilization to evolve beyond scarcity and competition. She didn't claim to channel aliens or to have secret knowledge. She simply shared ideas and perspectives that emerged from her deepened awareness. The blog attracted a following. Other people who felt like they didn't quite belong in normal human society, who carried memories or intuitions about other ways of living. who were drawn to crystals and consciousness and the intersection of spirituality and science. They recognized something in Amanda's words, even if they couldn't name what it was. She also changed her approach to her work. Instead of just writing code for corporate profit, she began developing open-source projects focused on decentralized networks, on systems that empowered individuals rather than concentrating power, on technology that served human flourishing rather than exploitation. Her new projects reflected the principles of the crystalline civilization. Networks where every node was equal, where information flowed freely, where the system's health depended on the health of all participants. She was building in human technology what she'd known in her crystalline existence. Amanda also deepened her relationship with crystals, but now with conscious understanding of why they called to her. She began teaching workshops where she helped others learn to meditate with crystals, to sense their frequencies, to use them as tools for consciousness expansion. She didn't claim crystals had magical powers in the superstitious sense, but she did teach that they were sophisticated structures that could help organize and amplify human consciousness, that they were essentially biological technology from Earth that served similar functions to the crystalline structures of her home civilization. People who worked with her reported profound experiences, healing of old traumas, expansion of awareness, sudden intuitive understanding of concepts they'd struggled with intellectually, connection to something larger than their individual selves. Amanda understood what was happening. The crystals were creating energetic structures similar to what she'd designed as Arya, spaces where consciousness could expand and evolve. The technology was far more primitive than what existed in her crystalline civilization, but the principles were the same. She also connected with others who remembered similar things. Through online communities and conferences, she met people who carried memories of advanced civilizations, of consciousness-based technologies, of ways of living far more harmonious than current human society. Some remembered crystalline civilizations like hers. Others remembered different types of advanced cultures. They formed a loose network, supporting each other, sharing insights, collaborating on projects that might help humanity evolve. They called themselves the Rememberers, a name that captured their shared sense of carrying knowledge from elsewhere, from before, from dimensions beyond normal human awareness. One man in particular, David, became a close friend and eventually partner. He remembered being part of the same soul group, remembered incarnating around the same time with a similar mission. Their connection was immediate and profound, based on recognition that went far deeper than personality or physical attraction. Together, they worked on bigger projects. A community center focused on consciousness exploration, educational programs teaching children to trust their intuition and inner knowing, research into the intersection of quantum physics and consciousness that might provide scientific validation for things mystics had always known. Their work gradually expanded, reaching more people, creating ripples of influence. They weren't trying to save the world or force rapid transformation. They were simply being themselves, sharing what they knew, trusting that others who were ready would find them. Amanda thought often about the crystalline civilization, about her life as Arya, about the choice to incarnate into biological form. There were times when she missed the perfection and stability, when human existence felt exhausting and limiting and frustrating. The density of physical matter, the slowness of human consciousness, the endless cycles of conflict and suffering. It was hard. But she also experienced things she'd never known in crystalline form. The taste of food, the feeling of sunshine on skin, the rush of falling in love, the satisfaction of physical accomplishment, the bitter sweetness of beauty that was temporary, precisely because it wouldn't last forever. Biological existence had a richness, an intensity, a vitality that crystalline existence lacked. The stakes were higher here. Every moment mattered because moments were finite. Every relationship was precious because it could end. Every experience was significant because it was unique and unrepeatable. She understood now why the elder in the crystalline civilization had proposed this experiment. They had optimized existence to the point where nothing was at risk, nothing was unknown, nothing challenged them to grow. They had created perfection, and in doing so had created stagnation. Earth, with all its chaos and imperfection, offered something invaluable: real growth, real evolution, real transformation that happened through struggle and limitation, and the constant navigation of impossible choices. Amanda also realized that her time on Earth wasn't infinite. Biological life was temporary by design. Eventually, her body would age and fail and die. And when it did, Her consciousness would return to the crystalline civilization, would bring back everything she'd learned, everything she'd experienced, everything she'd become through this adventure in flesh and time. That knowledge gave her a different relationship with death than most humans had. She didn't fear it. She saw it as a transition, a return home after a journey abroad, not the end but a transformation, a shift from one form of existence to another. This perspective allowed her to live more fully, to take risks she might not take if she believed this life was all there was. She could pursue her mission with dedication but without desperate attachment, knowing that the work would continue beyond this single lifetime, that she was part of something much larger and longer lasting than one human life. One night, about 2 years after her regression, Amanda had a vivid dream. She was back in the Crystalline City, standing in the central plaza where she'd attended that fateful gathering as Arya. The elder who had proposed the incarnation experiment was there, and their consciousness touched hers in recognition. "You are doing well," the elder communicated. "The experiment is succeeding. You and the others who incarnated are bringing back exactly what we needed: the fire, the passion, the intensity of biological existence. Keep going. Keep living fully. Keep learning everything this experience has to teach. And remember, you are never alone. We are always here, always watching, always supporting. The Crystalline network extends through all dimensions. You can access it whenever you need guidance or strength or simply the reminder of home." Amanda woke from the dream, feeling supported and encouraged. She wasn't alone in this mission. Thousands of other souls from her civilization, and similar ones, had incarnated on Earth and other planets, all working in their own unique ways to help consciousness evolve, to bridge the gap between spirit and matter, to show biological beings what was possible. She recommitted to her work with renewed energy. There was so much to do, so much potential waiting to be unlocked. Humanity was at a critical point, facing both existential threats and extraordinary opportunities. The next few decades would determine whether the species evolved toward something more harmonious and conscious, or collapsed under the weight of its own dysfunction. Amanda couldn't control the outcome. No individual could, but she could contribute her piece, could share what she knew could be an example of what was possible when humans remembered they were more than just biological machines, that consciousness was primary, that technology and spirituality could work together. The Crystalline civilization had given her this mission, and she would fulfill it to the best of her ability. For as long as this biological life lasted, the Crystalline cities still exist, in dimensions beyond physical perception, holding the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of conscious evolution. And the beings there are watching Earth now, hoping this experiment in biological incarnation will succeed, hoping humanity will remember who they truly are, hoping the seeds they planted will bloom into something beautiful. Maybe you're one of those seeds. Maybe you carry memories of crystalline cities and consciousness-based technology and ways of living far more harmonious than what currently exists on Earth. If so, your mission is simple: remember and help others remember. The future depends on those who haven't forgotten where they came from. Subscribe for more memories of who you were before you forgot.